Well, a pleasure to see everybody here. What a convention this year. Really some fantastic stuff. I just need to thank Katie. I need to thank Ken. I need to thank Anna. Really, maybe the best convention so far. With everything going on, with so much development and so many moving pieces, this was really a challenge, and I'm delighted that there have been so many really good presentations, that the technology has been working, that everybody's been so positive. So really, thank you to my team. Obviously, very impressed. Also, before I really get going on my keynote, I want to send a shout out to people that have made this whole event possible. Our platinum sponsor, Intrigue Nightclub, our gold sponsors here, Castle Fashions, and of course, Utherverse.io, which you've been hearing all about. I'm going to talk a little bit about too. Our silver sponsors, Woo's Comedy Club, of course, an all-time favorite, Other Academy, very excited. Legacy Inspired Films, what a wonderful arrangement we've got with LIF, and great presentation. I hope you're all as excited about that one as I am. And Ambassador Squares, thank you all. And of course, all of our bronze sponsors here too: Pure Power Streams, Z On Streams, the United Nations Foundation, All Things Weddings, the Learning Center, and the Basic Welcome Club. I mean, really appreciate all of you. And of course, the whole community here. I appreciate all of you too. And we're going to be talking a little bit about more about that today. So I thought, I sometimes take for granted that everybody has been here from the beginning. But obviously, I know that that's not true intellectually. And I thought today it might be interesting to start out with a little bit of, how we got here. This has been quite a journey, and I know that there are veterans among the people in attendance right now, but there's also a lot of new, relatively new people, and you probably don't know sort of the background, who I am, how this company came to be, and why it came to be. So, I got my start in the internet about 30 years ago now. Back when the internet really wasn't at all a commercial medium. The internet was really just educational, universities, which is how I got mostly introduced to it, and government. And at the time, I was an internationally syndicated newspaper cartoonist. But my comic wasn't appearing everywhere, of course. It was appearing in local markets. And I thought, the internet, this web thing would be an interesting place to put my daily comic out and see if people from other markets could enjoy the cartoon. And I put up a website on comicstrip.com and coded it myself, learned this, it was HTML 0.8 at the time, really just a trial language, but was able to update that every day. And I rapidly discovered why the internet was not at all commercial, because my site had become one of the more popular sites on the web, which is to say that I was getting about 300 to 500 people a day checking out the comic. And I started to get bandwidth bills that were $300 to $500 a month. Bandwidth was expensive. Hosting was expensive, slow. And I discovered that websites like mine would occasionally appear, but they disappear after a few weeks. And I realized, of course, this was happening because it's just too expensive to host a website on the internet back then. There's no way to get paid. So I reached out to a buddy of mine from NASA JPL, and the two of us worked together to put together my plan for putting ads on websites. This hadn't been done before, of course, and I spent a couple of years trying to raise venture capital without any success, but was able to assemble tens of thousands of websites that were willing to participate in this first kind of affiliate program. When I say put banners on websites, I want you to think about just the challenge that that posed, because it's not like it is today. You throw a banner up and there's a link and you can track it and everything. Back then, we're trying, first of all, to encourage sponsors to come in and buy advertising on this brand new medium. And we needed to be able to create markets. So here's a sports category, here's an automobile category, here's an entertainment category, so that there was enough traffic to have it interesting, which meant we needed to track the nature of the websites. We needed to know what banner we were putting on each site so that we would know if we had more than one sponsor, when they click the banner, where do they go? And we needed to be able to track back the website that was going to get credit for it and how much they were going to get credit based on how much we were paid. This was rocket science. I mean, literally a NASA engineer doing it with me, rocket science back in the day. And of course, it was successful. We did end up putting banners on websites. And 18 months later, I'm running from, my $700 investment. I'm running a company with 150 people with offices in Silicon Valley, LA. I was in Nevada, and we had started to bring in millions of people a month to the internet. And the internet just exploded all around. You could see our banners on just about every website. It was almost a joke that people would tell me, I can't hit a website without seeing your banners. We, of course, progressed very rapidly from that. Internet companies exploded all around us, and they were able to raise venture capital. In the meantime, we were exploring different ways to provide commercialization to the web. We invented pop under ads and got a patent on that. We exit traffic, I'm credited for pop-ups, a variety, multitude of advertising formats that really drove this explosion of web commerce. And as we progressed through that, we very rapidly started to pivot to what's the next iteration of the web going to look like? What is the next stage of the web development? So my team and I will post occasionally on my Twitter feed about getting a new patent here and a new patent there, and I'm up around I want to say 110 U.S. patents now. A lot of the next set of patents that we worked on, inventions that we worked on, centered around what is now called social media Web 2. We were calling it the interactive web, and my favorite patent in that family, in that grouping of patents, is a patent that I refer to as web rooms, which really laid out the precursor for what would become Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, and these social media applications. But when I started to see social media actually develop, I immediately became quite concerned that the technology which we had developed was being used in ways that, just like the pop-up, the pop-under, the patent office didn't get me the patents in time to be able to stop people from abusing it. They just waited and waited and waited, and of course it became hugely abused, and it was a horrible development, perversion of the technology. And it was the same thing, really, I felt with social media. We started to see these social media companies come up, and they generated, using the same kind of algorithms that we had talked about and disclosed, but using them to generate algorithmic anger, to generate algorithmic loneliness. So, I started to give talks. I remember I was at South by Southwest one year. I gave a talk on the perversion of social media and how it isolated people. It made people feel lonely because, you'll have hundreds or thousands of friends. Back in the time, MySpace, right? You'd have 100,000 friends or something. And what you would see is only the best of what your friends wanted to show you. And so you always felt like you were missing out. Your life was not as good because they weren't posting the 99% of their life. They were posting this 1% and casting it in the greatest light. And if you have enough friends, on these social media platforms, you're always going to see somebody posting something spectacular. And it's going to make you feel like, geez, we never do anything. I remember when I was married and I was living in Nevada, we used to go, my wife and I used to go to the casinos regularly to have dinner because they were phenomenal restaurants in the casinos. And she would tell me, like, we never win. Everybody else always wins these jackpots. Every time we walk through the casino to go to a restaurant, somebody's winning one of these progressive jackpots. How come we never win? And said, you know, look around the casino. There's got to be 10,000 slot machines here. And when somebody wins even $1,000, you know, this machine rings, it, you know, wants attention. It rings for 2 hours before they get paid out. So what you're not seeing is all of the people who are constantly losing. You're seeing, you know, you're hearing, because that's what they want to draw your attention to. That one machine that's paying out, that's going to ring for 6 hours today because somebody won $10,000. So it's not that we're always losing, it's that everybody's always losing. And, you know, it's these rare events when somebody wins, but they want to make it seem like it's all the time. And that's what social media really was to me at the time. I realized that it's problematic. So if we fast forward a couple of years, I had switched to my other business partner, Ray. I was doing business with him now. And Ray and I, after the stock market crash and you know, things sort of went off kilter, we regrouped to say, you know, what is now the next version of the web? What's the final version of the web? And how are we going to get from here to there? And how can we get there and fix the problems with social media and Web 2? And what we sort of hit on after a lot of brainstorming, you know, we took 3 trips to Amsterdam. And by the end of the 3rd trip, we were there really to take pictures of the great architecture, because we were planning on reconstructing Amsterdam as RLC and building it out, getting all the textures and getting, you know, these amazing churches and structures and canals and whatnot, so that we can really create a lifelike, you know, replica. We had, by the time we were done, we had really figured out that the ultimate form of the web was going to be a self-directed version of the Matrix, where you can live in a virtual reality construct that can provide you with everything that you would want to have, that's reasonable to be able to be provided at a low cost. It can create this new kind of wealth for everybody that participates. And at the same time, it can undo it's sort of like, I look at it like jujitsu. You can't stop social media. You can't stop people having their phones and being connected to it. But what you can do is you can pivot it in a way that takes the negativity out and puts a positive spin on things. And that really was the concept behind creating this immersive virtual environment where people weren't looking at other people's only the highlights and only these algorithms that are showing them what they've already, you know, reinforcing what they already believe, whether it's true or not. Instead, they're interacting with other real people behind real avatars, and they can put on their best skin, they can put on their best person, they can put on their best who they are inside, represented outwardly, but you know, you're actively involved with other people. So you get the highs and the lows, bringing us back to our really fundamental humanity and fundamental human nature in a way where we can lift people up when they really need lifting up, where we can support people, we can celebrate people when it's time to be celebrated, when there's, you know, positives and negatives, but have it all be genuine. And I'm really, really pleased and proud of the way that the community has developed in this ecosystem, where this really, I believe that we've achieved in Utherverse and in RLC. I mean, I've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars of donations from events that, you know, you all have made true and real. I've seen countless stories of people who have had real world problems, real life catastrophes that have been aided and helped by genuine friends that they would never have been able to connect with in this way on a flat web social media situation that could only be happening in our kind of immersive tight community. And this is what has driven me. I'm asked all the time why I still fight this fight, why I haven't retired to, some island and just living a life of luxury. And it's because I have never been in this for a life of luxury. I've always been in this because I feel as though I have a potential, and this company and this community has a potential to be world changing. To the world right now, it continues to deteriorate. It's frightening and becoming more frightening. There are anger that is amplified consistently now in our daily lives and what we see on our feeds. And I believe that there is really only one solution, and that is to pivot it, to jujitsu it in a way where if we can bring the whole world ultimately into this type of environment, that we can form the core, the basis, the foundation for lifting everybody up and going back to, our tribal nature, which is protect our fellow humans, and us to survive and thrive. So it became clear, started this project in the year 2000, I think, maybe 2001, first sort of brainstorming sessions. We really didn't know that whether everything would work or not. So back in those early days, I was really looking for some proof of concept, some way to know that what were brainstorming on was actually going to work as a commercial success. And over the course of a couple of years, we developed with a partnership with worlds.com. They had developed software. It had largely been abandoned. We ended up taking over some of that development and put together our very first virtual world on the worlds.com platform, and tossed it out and marketed a little bit to see if it would be commercially viable. And it was a hit right away. It was really just a glorified chat room with avatars and some regions, but it was successful sufficiently that I started to put resources in it. I started to put more and more of the company's attention towards developing this. Without getting into a long spiel about the history here, we ended up running into some problems with the worlds.com code base that were just intractable problems. It had been built too early. It just could not do the things that we needed it to do, namely, have millions of people come in, or even thousands of people, or really even hundreds of people, to be honest. There were just pieces that had not been thought through. So we then pivoted. We really started to think through what the software really needs to be able to do in order to flourish. And we pivoted over. We found Prototerra. We developed over the course of the next few years a really solid foundational piece that became Utherverse. And that software now has been running, I wanted to say 18 years, but it's 17 years and 11 months now. So almost 18 years. And I want to take people back to the beginnings of that because it has some parallels to where we are today with Xeon. So, of course, anybody who was here 18 years ago, 17.9 years ago, is going to remember the trials and tribulations of our first launch of what we now call our classic software. And boy, oh boy, there was, when I put together my first commercial website, the stress was ridiculous because there was nothing like the network that I put together back in those early days. And as soon as things were successful, my website was offline because there was no bandwidth. I remember being at a convention and talking to a bandwidth provider from WorldCom, and I said, I need bandwidth. What do you have? He said, well, we can get you a T1 line. I need 3 T3s. I said, no, you don't. I need 3 T3 lines at least. Says, well, I could talk to you about a T1 or we just choked out. I mean, I was using half the bandwidth of the internet, a little bit of hyperbole, but when the site would crash and it would be offline for a week at a time, nothing was more stressful. I'm sitting here trying to run banners on tens of thousands of websites and the whole network crashes because it's too successful. We had the same problem with Utherverse Classic. So I'm sure a lot of you remember the not just the boot monster, but the crashes. And I mean, there were times when we were offline there was one time I think we were offline for almost a week straight. And I mean, do all this marketing and we've got all of these events and we've got all this stuff happening and we're offline for a week. I mean, fortunately, that didn't happen often. Usually it was 8 hours, 10 hours. The crashing was ridiculous. The instability was ridiculous. But it slowly and surely got fixed. It slowly and surely got improved, optimized. And then we start, while we're optimizing and doing this, because it's a multi-year project, I mean, it really didn't get stable until the last, I want to say 6 years or so. It's been relatively stable. We had all kinds of features that we needed to develop. So when we launch Utherverse Classic, again, it's really a better glorified chat program. There's a lot more chat that you could do and private messaging, better than the worlds.com. But it really was very limited in terms of what people could actually do. We spent a huge amount of time and effort integrating a Web2 social center. So all of a sudden you can right click and you can have a profile and you can, have fun with the profile, and there's point systems. We ended up, we add more regions, we add a closet system. So, originally there was, just clothing for everyone. And then there was, packages of clothing that you could get. And then a closet system so that we could integrate a currency system. And we introduced Raise, and then we were able to introduce user-generated clothing, and we needed to create the upload system for that, and the protection systems for that, and the compensation systems for that. And then, the big one, introducing Zabbies and introducing user property catalog. So that users could then have businesses, users can open up their own virtual worlds. They can suddenly deco and they can get paid for deco. We're patching every Tuesday. So much, nobody's going to throw an event on Tuesdays. Nobody's going to have an event on Wednesday because we could very likely be down. But all of these pieces were big, monumental, foundational elements that allowed Utherverse Classic to really take its place as the prominent and dominant metaverse, although nobody was calling them metaverses until a couple of years ago. With the success, and a lot of the success was guided by community, and I have to say, I'll divulge a little bit of a trade secret here. It is a challenge to have so many potential projects, to have so many pieces that need to be put in place. I mean, if you think about even little things like glow stick, or even things like being able to drink and then have a sober up button, where do we put attention on the dance moves? Do we put attention on, adding new meshes? Are we hosting textures? Are we, how do we protect textures if they're hosted offsite? I mean, there's so many little pieces and big pieces and giant projects and small projects, and managing all of that and conceiving all of it and managing it is an enormous, overwhelming aspect of work. The community, you guys, make it much easier. I mean, it's why it was so important for me ultimately to create the forums that we use. When I would push on developers and say, this is an important feature, oh God, I have so many stories about it. But when I would push and say, this is an important feature, And the developers often, I mean, I've got a great team of developers now. But even the best, there's always discussion about what is really a priority and what are people really going to like. Having feedback from forums, having feedback coming from users to say, this is what we want, this is what is not working. Here are suggestions to modify it. I mean, this is like, I want to say, crowdsourcing development priorities. And in a large way, it helped me to influence the developers, to convince them that this is what really needs to be developed, and it needs to be developed in this way, because this is what the users are saying. See, I'm not crazy. I'm not, this is what people are asking for, or I was wrong. Oftentimes, this is what users are asking for, and I thought that they wanted to go in this direction. And through this iterative process, back and forth with me, the team, the users, we have been able to craft what I believe is a really wonderful blueprint, which is Utherverse Classic, a really honed and fine blueprint that if Zuckerberg and Meta, they're basically have started, and they're tossing away $1 billion a month trying to figure out what we already have gone through 2 iterations to perfect. And it's not perfect. So I use the word perfect a little bit flippantly. It's not perfect, but it has been honed and iterated, and it now serves as the blueprint for what we are releasing now. So of course, I'm skipping a big part, which is after Utherverse Classic, I thought that we had figured this stuff out, and we embarked on Curio. And I really thought that Curio was going to be what Xeon is now. But Curio ended up being a multi-year, many tens of millions of dollars investment that taught us also an enormous amount. It taught us a huge amount of that we can't just take what we had built with Classic and rebuild it on modern engines and rebuild it with modern graphics. There are major differences in the way that technology works, in the way that the tech stacks, and how to scale. All of that it ended up, let's say, an expensive lesson, but an important lesson. We developed a very good understanding of what the problems were. We have a big patent portfolio on now the solutions to these really intractable problems of replicating what we've done in a way that's really extensible, that's really charming and fun, and that can leverage all the power of these modern engines. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But from Curio to the rebirth of the development, it was really painful to say, okay, we're going to scrap that, and now we're going to take those lessons, combine them with the lessons that we learned from Classic, and we are going to build something new and something that will actually achieve all of the objectives that I've been talking about, that we've been pushing for 2 decades now. So this is the birth of Xeon. And with Xeon, we're able to take the lessons and the blueprint and this use case of more than 50 million users, franchised 17 different countries with the Classic platform, make sure that we don't fall into the same development traps and issues and problems that we had with Curio, and produce what you're now starting to see as what I envision as the next generation of the internet. So you've already been seeing here a lot of presentation of what's going on in Xeon. I know that there's got to be a lot of concerns, questions. When do you get to experience it yourself? How is the beta test going? Maybe it's good for me to talk about that a little bit. So the beta test launched September 26th, and coincidentally, what a what a tough time. I had managed to avoid COVID for 3.5 years, but I came down with COVID just as we launched the beta test, and just as I had never been busier, and that took a lot of the wind out of my sails. But luckily, I have a spectacular team around me. So as I'm struggling through, we successfully got beta out. I was hoping, of course, that by now we would be further along. But I want to give you an idea of what it took to actually launch this beta. We've got maybe I'll give some examples of systems that need to be in place, right? And it's important. Well, I'll circle back around to the start of Utherverse before I'm done here. So, in launching the beta, in developing Xeon, the first thing we needed to do was architect out everything that we expected it to need to do over the next 10, 20 years. This is an enormous project, and this is where we kind of got stuck with Curio, because if we don't plan out all of the technologies and how all of the technologies are ultimately going to integrate and work together, then we build pieces that are not compatible, and we need to start scrapping one, we need to start scrapping another. And when you're dealing with dozens of systems, you can end up scrapping them all repeatedly, which is essentially what killed Curio. These pieces were built independently. They were great. They don't work together. They don't work with this third piece. Which one are we going to keep? Well, this team is arguing we're keeping this one. This team is arguing we're keeping this one. I'm arguing that we should be keeping them all, and they should have worked together. But this time we have mapped it all out in advance. We use as a roadmap Classic. So all of the features from Classic, plus a bunch of the features that we wish we were able to do with Classic, but we can't. I want to see user-generated animations. I want to see user-generated avatars that can look like anything. I want to see an internet of games where you can change the entire user interface, and you can build a single-person game. You can build a multiplayer game, and these games can take an item, for example, and bring that item to a different game. So you don't need to build this massive game world yourself. You can collaborate with 20 other people, have partnerships where items from their game work in yours. Your game is a mini game for theirs. And this creates this web of video games, this web of online realities. You can have Harvard University, and you can have Nude Beach, and you can have a permission system that says you can't go from Nude Beach to Harvard without changing your avatar. This time of day, have one strip of sunlight that comes in. So you need to have an access control layer that prevents this avatar in these clothes from going here. We need to have what we call sovereigns that in the new system, which is when you build your virtual world, when you build your own metaverse using our tools, that you can set certain permissions. And these permissions can allow things to be radically different. Avatars that are all dinosaurs, avatars in a game that's all two-dimensional, like, a South Park episode. And you can't take your South Park character over to, Utherverse metaverse, because Utherverse metaverse is photorealistic. We're going to have concerts, we're going to have karaoke, we're going to have, film screenings and movie premieres and all kinds of fun, engaging activities. But we want people to be able to experiment. And this is what I mean when I say it's the next generation of the internet. I use that phrase a lot. It's really, it's not just Web3, it's the next stage of the internet, where it starts to become like the Matrix, where you can experiment. If you want avatars to be able to fly around in your region, if you want avatars to be able to be fish and swim around, or if you want avatars that are like chess pieces, and all of the physics are different, you can experiment with that. If people like that, then that metaverse becomes popular. If it's not popular, then other users will experiment with all kinds of things and ultimately discover so many attractive features that we ourselves wouldn't necessarily be able to come up with. And on top of that, it means users to be able to script. And how are we going to allow scripting and modifications to be able to take place inside this environment in a safe way? And speaking of safety, how do we ensure that that minors are protected, that minors don't go to a casino world, that minors don't go to an adult content world, that minors aren't predated by adults communicating with them in private. All of these things are very important to me and important to all of us. And all of these pieces need to be considered in light of adding in, the motion capture systems, adding in, these web call systems so that we're not packaging this as a giant video game, so that we're able to grab assets from the web and bring them in and update scenes in real time without a patch, right? So you can prop edit, and then of course all of these advanced prop editing techniques and technologies that we've figured out from Classic, and that we would love to jam into Classic, but there's it's a challenge to do that. And all of this on the most modern graphic engines, that things that we've learned from dance teams about how the animation should work. And how the user interface should work. Anyway, all of these, it's a massive, massive compilation list of things. And so where we are with beta is, we have an enormous amount of this infrastructure built. We have a large number of these features built or partially built. We have a huge amount of brain power that has gone into architecting, how Xeon will work as a web browser, how the browser bar works, how domain name systems is going to work, how search is going to work, and all of these features to really create this powerful metaverse platform, search engine, browser system that will allow us to create the kind of global community that I've really been envisioning, that I think all of us would really like to see happen, and mitigate some of the harms from the existing social media, and really take the temperature of the world down, which I really think needs to happen urgently. So what is this all going to mean? I like to talk about just, some examples. I guess I talked about one, which is this, Internet of Games. But other examples, just, we're sitting here having a convention right now. There's people from all over the world at this convention. Imagining when we've integrated AI, when we've integrated recording functions and features, and searching your own experience capabilities, where you could be walking a trade show floor. We can have conventions for all kinds of industry. What an environmental panacea. You don't need to fly people from all over the world, using jet fuel and at the cost to come to, a Vegas convention center where it costs $30 million to build out a trade show floor using all of these materials and labor, and pulling all of your people, your human resources for companies that are going to be at the convention. Instead, the cost structure can be, 1/1000th of what it would be in the real world. The carbon footprint is 1/1000th of what it would be in the real world, and you can have 1,000 times more people because anybody who's interested can pop in. You're not, businesses aren't losing the productivity of their people, so it makes the entire world more productive. I like to talk about things like fashion and wardrobe, and the integration of metaverse with, with real world, so what we call digital clones, right? Imagine now when you are buying clothes online, instead you buy them and you get a digital version for your avatar as well. First of all, your avatar can look exactly like you. So, you go shopping and you say, well, I own this blouse. I want to see if these shoes go with it. So you put on the blouse that you own in the real world for the shoes that you're going to buy in the real world, because your closet has a replica of everything digitally. You can then sort your closet. You can have AI help you say, you wore this 3 weeks ago when you were meeting this person. So if you're meeting them again, you probably want to wear something different. Great, thank you. I can never remember, right? And the AI is not going to forget clothes that I have in the back of my closet. So we're creating efficiencies here with eventually over time, your entire wardrobe in the real world will be digital. Plus, you'll have a bunch of digital only, and you'll have a bunch of neat other kinds of assets there that will go into the wardrobe. If you're going to be in augmented reality or virtual reality, or of course in the real world, and these types of things where, wow, I can try it before I buy it, and I don't need to remember to wear the jeans that I want to wear with these with this top and see if it goes. Of course, we all know, because we've experienced it so much, making friends in metaverse and dating in metaverse, and how this is so much different and so vastly superior in my mind to any kind of online dating system, because here you're meeting people through friends very naturally. You get to see how people behave in groups, and you're behaving in groups, and so the social pressure is off to try to start a conversation. Is it appropriate to try to hit on somebody? You're experiencing not this kind of detached, let's say, social, Tinder type of experience. You're having a real connection experience with people. You're getting to know them and decide if you like them. From a social standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, I think what we're looking at for metaverse is really the most groundbreaking version of the internet ever, and it's going to be really transformative at a time when we need something to be transformative. I mean, let's face it. I think everybody's feeling the pinch of inflation. Everybody's feeling the pinch of, life and stress right now. And having a place where you can go, where you have genuine friends, genuine connections, where we're bringing down the cost for entertainment, we're bringing down the cost for shopping, and there are other ways in which we're really creating, with Xeon particularly, this next generation of internet that is going to have the same and a much greater impact on the world and the economy and than the original internet itself did. And I hope, because I really believe that this is the last great transformation that we're going to see, I hope that it's done through our platform. And I hope that governments around the world aren't going to end up killing the golden goose here, because the world needs change. The world needs this kind of beneficial, humanitarian, globally equalizing opportunity, where people anywhere in the world can participate, anywhere in the world can make a living, and we can get to know each other all over the world, instead of being limited to our geography. I think that in this way, we can build real, true social connections. In this way, we can create bonds with people that we would otherwise never know, except as a stereotype, or except as how it's being portrayed to us through the propaganda machine. And when we know that people are people, when we can understand that they all experience the same things we do, we all experience anxiety, and we all experience depression, we all have problems that happen in our lives. I mean, everybody experiences a death of somebody close to them. Everybody experiences an illness. Some people, of course, have, and I'm not trying to say everybody's experiences are equal. Some people suffer more acutely than other people, particularly at different times of life. But it's all the human experience. And this is something to be loved and cherished. And we need to change social media. We need to change how we interact with technology to elevate those feelings of wanting to help, feelings of love, feeling of community, and minimize these feelings of people are different from me. I am alone here, which just is eating humanity from the inside out. So I guess I want to circle back. I was talking about how beta is going. Lots and lots of features that we have in queue. But we made the decision, so we've let in a few hundred people, and we made the decision that that was a sufficient number where we really want to fix up everything that we saw as an issue and add in the next set of features. The next set of features, I think, should be, I always hate to give a deadline and end up having it not come true. But it should be sometime next week where we have things tested out. There's a new set of features. We should be able to build a new build. And if that one goes off the way that I believe that it will, we can quickly go through the red group, the blue group, and get to gold. Getting to the gold group is, of course, my objective because that's where most of you have been placed. And I am dying to start having real packed events. We've got concerts set up. We've got DJs ready to go. We're, looking at movie screenings and celebrities coming in, to have discussions about these movies. So at that point, things are really going to kick off. Things should then start to happen quite quickly. So I'm not disappointed. Everything is in range of where we expected it to be, but it's always a sort of a playing this based on actual real events and real feedback. So as we learn, as we see that there are deficiencies, fix them up so that we don't need everybody reporting them before we let in the next group. But I think this is all now going to happen fairly quickly. I fully expect that we're going to be having some really amazing stuff going on this, by the holiday season for sure. And then the features that you can expect to have here are really going to start to be mind-blowing. I mean, I talked a little bit about, everything that you are able to do in Classic, you will be able to do in Xeon, and a bunch of other stuff. At a bare minimum, things like being able to create your own animations and get them in. The scripting is going to be much more powerful, which is going to allow much more customization. There will be businesses. There's going to be commerce. I guess I really wanted to talk a little bit about the commerce. In fact, let me do that. Let me do that now. Just very, very quickly before I show you one more thing. So I know that I've heard a lot of pushback about Web3, about cryptocurrency and about NFTs, and people concerned, like, do I need to deal with this stuff in order to be able to enjoy Xeon? And the reality is, you've all already been dealing with it. You will not need to understand really the difference, but when you deal with Raise, you're really dealing with an in-world currency, a virtual currency. The fact that Raise aren't minted as a token on a blockchain is really just a back-end kind of detail. When we have the Uther coin, it is going to operate essentially the same way Raise operate for anybody that wants it to operate that way. But then there will be additional advantages if you want to have this token have more function for you, which is to say you'll be able to move it out to the blockchain, and then you'll be able to transact and do things with the token on the blockchain. But you won't have to. You will be able to use your in-world account and transact in-world just like you do with Raise. Similarly, NFTs. You've already, I mean, you are the world experts essentially on NFTs, because every item of clothing you have is an FNFT, except that it's not minted to the blockchain. You know, your virtual, your Zabi, your properties, the textures in Deco, your avatar, and you know, how you've customized your avatar. All of these things are, when I talk about an FNFT, which is a functional NFT, that's what I'm talking about. The only difference is, instead of having it stored in our database, it is encrypted onto the blockchain. That difference will mean nothing to you unless you want it to. You could still operate everything just the same. But you know, my little bit of advice here, I don't want to take too much longer. But my little bit of advice is that there is a good reason to be skeptical of cryptocurrencies, and a great reason to be skeptical of NFTs. I believe that in the end, there are going to be basically two cryptocurrencies that have any real value. One is Bitcoin, and I really recommend, I know that times are tight, I really recommend that everybody have a tiny bit of Bitcoin. It will serve you well over time. I recommend that you don't look at it as an investment. You just look at it as an asset that you own, and never compare it to another currency, because that's not, the point is not to spin it and make money. The point is to hold it in the event of a, you know, an event of a catastrophic default of a fiat currency. We can talk about this a lot more if you have interest, but I won't get into it in this speech. But that's my recommendation. The other cryptocurrency that is going to have value, of course, is going to be our token, the Uther coin, and that's going to have value because you're going to need it, just like you need Raise. You need Raise to be able to rent, to be able to buy clothing, to be able to, you know, transact. And inside of a metaverse, you always need to have a unit of account. And you need to have a store of value. And this is what Uthercoin is going to do. And as far as NFTs go, you know, they're going to have the same value here as your wardrobe, as your apartment, as all of these elements that you currently have as virtual goods. So I recommend, don't be afraid of crypto, don't be afraid of NFTs. You're already pretty much experts. You just use different words for it, and the differences are not significant. I want to talk about one last thing, and that is Utherverse. Now, you know, I never took investment. I always funded everything on my own, up until the last couple of years, when I started to position the company to go public. And in positioning it to go public, I needed to bring in finance guys. I needed to bring in teams that were that understood the capital markets and everything. And as part of this quest, now, for the first time, it is available for people to come in and purchase, participate, let's say, invest in Utherverse. So before I launched out to a major way, I put together this campaign on a website called republic.com. You can see it here. If you go to republic.com/Utherverse, you will come to this campaign page. And I think there's nobody better to have as investors than the community that has helped us get to where we are already, has done so much to participate. I know that times are tight for many, many people. We put the minimum investment here as $100. If you would like to participate, please go to republic.com/Utherverse and check out the page. I wanted to make this available before we sell it out. I wanted to make this available to anybody that is part of our community, anybody that's listening to me talk, especially all the way to the end, because I really do want you to participate in our success, if you can. And if times are too tight, obviously understand, and we all do what we can do. But I wanted to make sure that I made this opportunity available and that I highlighted it here at the convention before it's too late. So you'll see what we've got on the page. You can read through it. There's a place to have discussion. There's a place to have to ask questions or to reach me, and happy to have most happy when I've seen members, particularly longstanding members, reaching out and telling me that they've put a little bit of money to back this vision. Well, geez, I was not expecting to talk for an entire hour, but I guess it was important. So I hope I answered questions if you have them. I hope you were entertained. I hope you feel the same way that I do, that really what we're doing here is way beyond just an escape, that it really is important, and it really is world changing, and the world does need that change. And I am excited to have all of you participating with me in this mission. And thank you for attending. I thanked a lot of people, staff and sponsors, but I definitely want to thank all of you as the community, because without you, of course, nothing else matters that we do. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of the convention.